In the year 730,000 AD, bloodthirsty Brunali alien fleets descend upon the human-controlled galaxy, hell-bent on crushing humanity's greatest empire to date and enslaving every living human for eternity. Brutal Brunali shock troops surge through human space, slaughtering entire colonies with ruthless savagery. The sadistic Brunali warlord Umbra leads his hordes to conquer and raze innumerable human worlds, erasing all traces of human civilization. Only the iron-willed human commander Anthony Mitchell and his elite warriors stand between the Brunali onslaught and the annihilation of the human race. A dire distress signal pierces through hyperspace from a distant human outpost under siege by merciless Brunali forces. Commander Anthony and his crack team rocket toward the outpost at top speed, knowing they cannot fail. The fate of humanity itself hangs in the balance. If this outpost falls, a full-scale Brunali invasion of human space will undoubtedly follow, spelling doom for the human race. Anthony's stomach clenches and his knuckles turn white as he grips the ship controls. He navigates his squadron through the debris of battle towards the besieged outpost. His eyes widen as he beholds the carnage. Packs of snarling Brunali shock troops armed with searing plasma weapons and crackling energy shields tear into the hopelessly outgunned human soldiers. The stench of scorched flesh permeates the air. Panicked human screams mingle with the guttural battle roars of the encroaching Brunali horde. The outpost is on the brink of collapse. There's only one option. Commander Anthony orders his troops to their drop pods and leads them in a desperate plunge straight into the heart of battle. Pods smash behind enemy lines, and Anthony's soldiers pour out with rifles blazing. They surge into the smoke and rubble of the collapsing outpost as plasma bolts and explosions rock the air. Wave after wave of hideous armored Brunali warriors charge at Anthony's men, fangs gnashing. In the chaos of close-quarters combat, Anthony's soldiers manage to temporarily repel the Brunali advance and evacuate the surviving humans. But a crisis unfolds. The outpost's critical long-range communications array, an essential keystone of humanity's military coordination, has just been seized by Brunali forces intact. If the array falls into Brunali hands, they'll intercept transmissions and gain a crippling advantage, undoubtedly dooming the human resistance. Anthony hastily assembles a crack suicide squad to destroy the array before it's too late. They fight tooth and nail through the hellscape the outpost has become, blasting through Brunali barricades to reach the comm center. Anthony's heart pounds as he and his men hastily rig the array with explosive charges. This array cannot fall to the aliens, no matter the cost. An ominous hiss. Anthony's head snaps up as a menacing figure steps from the shadows, flanked by two monstrous Brunali guards. Umbra himself. Here. Now. Umbra's eyes gleam with cold alien intelligence as he levels a massive plasma cannon at Anthony's head. All hell breaks loose. Soldiers scream. Weapons shriek. Umbra's bodyguards rip into Anthony's men with horrifying ferocity. Plasma bolts and shrapnel fly as Anthony's valiant squad is torn to pieces. Anthony roars with pain and rage as he's blasted to the ground, bleeding, crippled, as his brothers fall dead around him. With the last of his strength, he presses the detonator. The array explodes in a blinding flash. Anthony blacks out as the force of the blast hurls his broken body like a rag doll. When he awakens, he's being dragged in chains before a leering Umbra, the smoldering wreckage of the array behind them. The outpost is saved. The array is denied to the aliens. But the cost is devastating. As Anthony kneels before his captor, he realizes the horror is only beginning. This is the first salvo of a cataclysmic war between human and Brunali. And the Brunali now hold a high-ranking human commander captive. The battle for the very survival of humanity, for the future of the galaxy itself, has begun. Anthony wakes with a jolt, his head pounding, every muscle in his body screaming in pain. He blinks, trying to focus his blurry vision. Cold metal walls surround him, bathed in dim red light. The air is stale, reeking of sweat and something else, something alien. He's in a Brunali prison cell. The door hisses open and two hulking Brunali guards stomp in. They grab Anthony roughly, slamming him against the wall. A tall, wiry Brunali with cold, calculating eyes steps forward. An interrogator. "Human," the interrogator hisses. "You will tell us your military secrets, your strategies, your plans. You will give us the keys to crush your pathetic species." Anthony spits in his face. "Go to hell." The interrogator snarls. The guards slam Anthony to the floor, pinning him down. Agony rips through him as they begin the first of many brutal interrogations. Hours bleed into days. Anthony's world narrows to pain and the incessant questioning. They beat him, burn him, inject him with mind-warping drugs that set his nerves on fire. Through it all, Anthony grits his teeth and holds on, drawing on every ounce of his training, his unbreakable will. He won't betray his people, his species, no matter what they do to him. The interrogator grows more frustrated, more vicious with each failed session. Finally, he snaps, backhanding Anthony viciously across the face. "Enough! This human is too stubborn for standard procedures. We need Umbra's personal touch." The guards drag a semi-conscious Anthony down dank, twisting corridors, deeper into the bowels of the prison. They hurl him into a pitch-black isolation cell, slamming the reinforced door shut with a resounding clang. Anthony slumps against the wall, tasting blood, every breath sending shards of pain through his chest. He knows what's coming. Umbra himself is going to work on breaking him. The worst is yet to come. Hundreds of light years away, in the heart of human space, Captain Zhang Li stands rigidly before the High Command. Her heart races, her mind locked on one overriding imperative: saving Anthony. "Captain Li," the Admiral says gravely, "Commander Mitchell is our top priority. We cannot allow the Brunali to extract classified intel from him. You will lead the rescue operation. Bring him back, at any cost." "Yes, sir," Zhang replies fiercely. "I'll bring him home." She assembles her team, the best of the best, hardened veterans, razor-sharp infiltration specialists, stone-cold pilots and techs. They arm themselves with cutting-edge weaponry and captured Brunali stealth tech. Jiang checks and rechecks every detail of the audacious plan. They'll ghost into enemy space, undetected, find Anthony, and blast their way out. Failure is not an option. Light years behind enemy lines, Anthony shivers on the floor of his fetid cell, racked with pain, hovering on the knife's edge of consciousness. The door screeches open. Umbra looms over him, eyes glinting with malice. "Let us begin, human." Days crawl by in a haze of agony. Anthony retreats deep into his mind as Umbra employs ever more sadistic methods. He clings to thoughts of Earth, of his fellow soldiers, his family. They become a talisman against the pain, a lifeline to his humanity as Umbra tries to strip it away. After a particularly vicious session, Anthony slumps in his restraints, blood dripping from his mouth, vision blurring. Umbra snarls in fury, lashing out viciously. In that instant of transferred attention, Anthony acts. With a burst of adrenaline-fueled strength, he wrenches free of his bonds. He lunges at the startled guards, snapping the first one's neck with a savage twist. Seizing the guard's plasma rifle, he whirls and fires point-blank into the second guard's face. Umbra roars in rage, reaching for his sidearm. Anthony doesn't hesitate. Still firing, he hurls himself at the cell's exterior door controls. The door explodes outward in a shower of sparks and smoke. Then he's running, staggering, through the harsh halls of the prison, alarms blaring, Brunali soldiers pouring from every direction. He blasts a hole through their lines and plunges through it, into the greater prison complex. Anthony staggers from the prison gates into the howling storm outside, Umbra's furious bellows echoing behind him. Clutching the stolen rifle, he lurches into the jagged, unforgiving wilderness, disappearing into the punishing storm. Umbra screams for his soldiers to pursue, to bring the human back alive. The hunt is on. Anthony runs, stumbles, claws his way through the hostile landscape, calling on every last shred of his elite survival training. Hurricane winds batter him, icy rain lashes his skin. His many wounds throb with each movement, but he pushes on, driven by pure grit, an unquenchable will to survive. Clambering over a ridgeline, he spots hints of alien ruins rising from the lashing rain. Crumbling structures, jagged and worn, but unquestionably artificial. He staggers toward them, desperate for shelter, for a moment's respite to gather his wits and plan his next move. Within the ruins, Anthony discovers shattered relics of a long-dead civilization, eradicated by the Brunali eons ago. And among the rubble, the remains of strange and wondrous technology, weapons and devices beyond anything he's seen before. A flicker of hope sparks in his chest. If he can recover this tech, understand it, it could change everything. Give humanity the edge it needs to win this war. But Umbra's hunting party is closing fast, fanning out through the howling storm. Anthony can hear their harsh alien shouts, glimpse the glow of their plasma rifles in the murky deluge. Heart pounding, he prepares to make his stand, no way out but through. And high above, a faint sensor ping appears on the screens of a cloaked human dropship, Jiang's rescue team, entering atmosphere, homing in on Anthony's location. The final pieces fall into place for a cataclysmic showdown on this remote, desolate world, with the fate of Commander Anthony Mitchell, and perhaps all humanity, hanging in the balance. The deafening roar of plasma weapons filled the air as Jiang's rescue team touched down on the prison planet. Anthony ducked behind a rocky outcropping, heart pounding as he surveyed the chaos. Brunali forces swarmed towards him, their hulking forms illuminated by the flashes of weapons fire. "Commander Mitchell!" a voice shouted over the din. Anthony turned to see Captain Zhang Li sprinting towards him, dodging plasma bolts. "We need to move!" Anthony nodded, gritting his teeth against the pain of his injuries. He and Jiang fought their way through the melee, blasting Brunali soldiers left and right. The rest of the rescue team provided covering fire as they pushed towards the alien structure Anthony had discovered. "In there!" Anthony yelled, gesturing to the looming edifice. They burst through the entrance, sealing the massive doors behind them. Inside, an eerie blue glow bathed the cavernous chamber. At its center pulsed a crystalline object, thrumming with power. "What is that?" Jiang breathed. "Our ticket out of here," Anthony replied. He approached the crystal carefully, feeling its energy wash over him. With trembling hands, he grasped it, wincing at its searing heat. Alarms blared. The Brunali were breaching the doors. "Time to go!" Anthony shouted. They fought their way back to the stealth ship, Anthony clutching the precious artifact. As they lifted off, Brunali weapons fire peppered the hull. Once safely in orbit, the ship's scientists examined the pulsating crystal. "This technology, it's beyond anything we've ever seen," one researcher marveled. "The energy readings are off the charts." Anthony's mind raced. This could change everything. We need to find where it came from. He contacted High Command, outlining his plan to track down the origin of this ancient civilization. The brass agreed. This was too important to ignore. Within days, an expeditionary force was assembled. Anthony and Jiang pored over data gleaned from the prison planet ruins, piecing together clues. "There," Anthony said, pointing to a star map. "That's where we need to go." Their fleet jumped to light speed, venturing into uncharted space. They emerged near a massive structure, a wormhole nexus. "My God," Jiang whispered as they passed through, emerging in a distant sector of the galaxy. They explored world after world, each holding fragments of the ancients' legacy. Decaying megastructures, repositories of knowledge, and caches of strange devices. On a desolate planet, they hit the jackpot, a vast underground complex housing weapons of unimaginable power. As the humans prepared to transport their prize, alarms blared. "Brunali ships incoming!" a sensor tech shouted. Umbra's forces poured from their vessels, converging on the humans' position. Anthony made a snap decision. "Use the ancient weapons," he ordered. Energy beams lanced out, vaporizing Brunali troops. For a moment, victory seemed assured. Then disaster struck. A stray shot struck the crystal powering the ancient tech. Energy erupted, the wormhole nexus flickering ominously. "The network's collapsing," Jiang yelled. "We need to evacuate now." Chaos erupted as humans scrambled for their ships. Anthony realized someone needed to stabilize the Nexus. "Get everyone out," he told Jiang. "I'll buy you time." He sprinted for the control center as the others retreated. His fingers flew over alien consoles, struggling to maintain the wormholes. Through the view screen, he watched the last human vessel vanish into the collapsing tunnel. Then the Nexus exploded in a blinding flash. When the light faded, Anthony found himself alone amidst the ruins. The wormholes were gone. He was stranded on the far side of the galaxy, surrounded by the echoes of a long-dead civilization. Anthony's eyes adjusted to the dim light as the remnants of the portal faded behind him. His heart sank as he took in his surroundings. This wasn't Earth. This wasn't even friendly territory. The towering spires and harsh angular architecture could only mean one thing. He was in the heart of Brunali space. "Shit," he muttered, ducking behind a nearby pillar as a patrol of Brunali soldiers marched past. He clutched the prototype device to his chest, its slight warmth a reminder of everything he'd endured to get here. The alien dimension had nearly broken him. Each day brought new horrors, reality twisting around him, his own body feeling foreign and wrong. But he'd persevered, driven by the hope that what he learned could save humanity. Now that hope felt like ash in his mouth. He was trapped on the Brunali homeworld, surrounded by enemies, with no way to contact Earth. A siren blared, causing Anthony to flinch. "Attention, citizens!" A guttural voice boomed. "Human infiltrator detected in Sector 7. All units converge. Shoot on sight." "Damn it," Anthony hissed. He'd been detected already. Staying put wasn't an option. He sprinted from cover, keeping low and sticking to shadows. The prototype device felt heavy in his arms as he ran. He couldn't let the Brunali get their hands on it. If they learned to harness the power of higher dimensions, humanity wouldn't stand a chance. Anthony rounded a corner and froze. A squad of Brunali troops blocked his path, plasma rifles raised. "Surrender, human," their leader growled. Anthony's mind raced. He thought of all he'd learned in the alien dimension, the impossible physics he'd witnessed. Taking a deep breath, he activated the prototype. Reality warped around him. The Brunali's shots passed through empty air as Anthony phased partially out of normal space-time. It felt like his insides were being turned inside out, but he grit his teeth and pushed forward. He burst through the Brunali line, their hulking forms passing through him like smoke. As soon as he cleared them, he deactivated the device. The sudden snap back to normal space sent him sprawling to the ground, gasping for air. No time to rest. Anthony staggered to his feet and kept running. He had to find a way off this planet, had to get this tech back to Earth. The fate of humanity depended on it. Behind him, he heard Umbra's enraged roar. "Find that human! I want him alive!" Anthony ran faster, each step taking him deeper into enemy territory. He didn't know how he'd escape, but he knew one thing. He'd die before letting the Brunali win. Anthony's lungs burned as he sprinted through the neon-lit streets of the Brunali colony world. Alien architecture loomed overhead, casting strange shadows across his path. He ducked into an alleyway, pressing himself against the cold metal wall as a patrol stomped past. Once the coast was clear, he consulted the stolen datapad. A blinking dot indicated his target, a remote scientific compound on the outskirts of the city. Anthony gritted his teeth and pushed on. Hours later, he crouched in the underbrush outside the facility's perimeter. Sleek, angular buildings rose before him, filled with sensors and defensive turrets. Anthony studied the patrol patterns, waiting for his moment. When the guards changed shifts, he made his move. He slipped past the fence, using the prototype device to phase through solid matter. The sensation made his skin crawl, but he pressed on. Inside the compound, Anthony navigated sterile corridors, narrowly avoiding detection. He found an empty lab and sealed the door behind him. Rows of alien computers hummed softly. Anthony's fingers flew across the unfamiliar interface. His eyes widened as he decrypted file after file. "My God," he whispered. The Brunali were experimenting with dimensional gateways, reverse engineering technology from the ruins. He needed to warn Earth. Anthony spotted a prototype communicator on a nearby workbench. He snatched it up, frantically inputting the coordinates for human space. Just as the signal connected, alarms blared throughout the facility. Anthony cursed, grabbing the communicator and bolting for the door. He heard the pounding of Brunali boots echoing down the hallway. Anthony sprinted for the hangar bay, phasing through walls to evade his pursuers. He burst into the cavernous space, eyes locking onto a sleek Brunali fighter. Without hesitation, he vaulted into the cockpit. The engines roared to life as Anthony's fingers danced across the alien controls. The fighter blasted out of the hangar, rocketing into the planet's upper atmosphere. But his relief was short-lived. "Human scum!" a voice crackled over the comms. "Surrender now or be destroyed." Anthony glanced at his sensor display. A squadron of Brunali fighters closed in fast, led by a larger command ship. Umbra. What followed was a frantic dogfight through the planet's orbital debris field. Anthony jinked and rolled, barely avoiding sizzling energy beams that lanced past his cockpit. But he was outnumbered and outgunned. A lucky shot clipped his wing, sending the fighter into a wild spin. Warning lights flashed across the console. Anthony gritted his teeth and punched the eject button. He was violently expelled from the disintegrating craft, tumbling through the void in his pressure suit. A nearby moon loomed large in his field of vision. Anthony angled his trajectory, aiming for its pockmarked surface. The impact rattled every bone in his body. He lay in the ejection pod, gasping for breath, as Brunali ships screamed overhead. Anthony stumbled out onto the lunar surface, eyes scanning desperately for shelter. In the distance, he spotted the unmistakable silhouette of alien ruins. Anthony activated his suit's propulsion system, bounding across the low-gravity landscape. Behind him, Brunali dropships touched down, disgorging waves of troops. Anthony reached the ruins, ducking inside a crumbling structure. He pulled out the stolen communicator, praying it had survived the crash. To his relief, it crackled to life. His fingers flew across the device, breaching Brunali encryption protocols. "This is Commander Anthony Mitchell," he transmitted. "I have critical intel on Brunali dimensional tech. Sending data now." Outside, he heard the approaching whine of Brunali vehicles. Anthony's mind raced. He needed more time. His eyes fell on an ancient control panel, still pulsing with faint energy. An insane plan formed in his mind. Anthony interfaced the communicator with the alien tech, overriding fail-safes and redlining power levels. The ground beneath his feet began to tremble. Geysers of superheated gas erupted across the lunar surface. Anthony smiled grimly. He'd triggered a chain reaction in the moon's core. Alarms blared from his suit as the atmosphere grew thick with toxic fumes. Anthony staggered out of the ruins, barely able to see through the choking haze. Brunali troops swarmed towards him, plasma bolts sizzling past. The moon shuddered violently. Fissures split the ground, swallowing up entire squads of Brunali soldiers. Anthony stumbled forward, clutching the communicator to his chest. Through the chaos, he spotted a shimmering portal. A dimensional gateway, like the one that had brought him here. It flickered unstably, destabilized by the moon's impending destruction. Anthony gathered his last reserves of strength and sprinted for the portal. Behind him, he heard Umbra's enraged roar. "Stop him!" The gateway pulsed, beginning to collapse. Anthony hurled himself forward with everything he had left. For a heart-stopping moment, he was suspended between realities. Then he was through, tumbling across harsh alien terrain. The communicator clattered to the ground beside him. Anthony lay there, gasping for breath, as the dimensional tier sealed shut behind him. Slowly, he pushed himself to his feet, taking in his new surroundings. The terrain was alien, but somehow familiar. In the night sky above, he saw a pattern of stars he recognized. Anthony let out a disbelieving laugh. Against impossible odds, he'd made it back to the edge of human space. He activated his suit's distress beacon, knowing rescue wouldn't be far behind. As he waited, Anthony allowed himself a moment of triumph. The intel he'd risked everything to obtain was now safely in human hands. With this new understanding of dimensional technology, humanity finally had a chance to turn the tide against the Brunali threat. Anthony gazed up at the stars, a fierce smile on his face. The real war was just beginning. The real war was just getting started. Anthony's legs buckled as he stepped off the transport. Medics rushed to his side, supporting him as he stumbled onto the landing pad. The Earth's familiar gravity felt strange after so long in alien environments. "Commander Mitchell, sir," a crisp salute from a waiting officer. "We need you in the war room immediately." Anthony nodded wearily, allowing himself to be guided through the sprawling military complex. His mind raced, trying to organize the flood of information he needed to convey. The blast doors to Central Command slid open. Rows of grim-faced officers turned to stare as Anthony entered. At the head of the table sat Admiral Helena Vance, her steely eyes locked on him. "Report, Commander," she ordered. Anthony took a deep breath. "The Brunali, they're not what we thought. They've been manipulating higher dimensions, tapping into power beyond our comprehension. But I've brought back the key to evening the odds." He placed the stolen datapad on the table. Holographic schematics sprang to life, filling the air with swirling equations and alien geometries. "My God," someone whispered. For hours, Anthony detailed his discoveries. The extinct civilization's ruins, the true nature of Brunali tech, the horrors he'd witnessed in the twisted dimensions beyond our own. As he spoke, teams of scientists and engineers pored over the stolen data. Prototypes were hastily constructed, theories tested and confirmed. Anthony watched in awe as humanity's brightest minds unraveled in days what had taken the Brunali centuries to master. Within weeks, the first human-made dimensional gateway crackled to life. Anthony stood before the shimmering portal, memories of his harrowing journey flooding back. "Sir!" a young lieutenant sprinted up, snapping a salute. "We're ready to deploy the new weapons. The counteroffensive is a go." Anthony nodded grimly. "Then let's take the fight to them." He stepped through the gateway. In an instant, he materialized light years away, on the bridge of the UES Defiant. Through the view screen, he saw hundreds of ships, humanity's new fleet, armed with weaponry that bent the very fabric of space-time. "All ships, this is Commander Mitchell," he broadcast. "Execute jump sequence. Hit them hard, hit them fast." Space warped around them as the fleet engaged their dimensional drives. They reappeared deep in Brunali territory, catching the alien forces completely off guard. Beams of exotic energy lashed out, tearing through Brunali ships effortlessly. Anthony watched as human strike teams used portable gateways to teleport directly into enemy installations, neutralizing them from within. For days, the assault continued. Brunali worlds fell one after another, unable to counter humanity's new dimensional arsenal. Anthony allowed himself a grim smile. The tables had turned. But even as they celebrated their victories, reports came in of Umbra regrouping his forces. The Brunali were adapting, pushing their own dimensional research to new heights. Anthony stared at the star map, watching as new conflict zones erupted across the galaxy. This war was a long way to go. Both sides now wielded the power to tear reality itself apart. "Sir," his XO reported, "we've detected unusual energy readings from an uncharted system. Could be more alien ruins." Anthony's eyes narrowed. "Set a course. We need to find whatever's out there before Umbra does." As the Defiant jumped to light speed, Anthony couldn't shake the feeling that an even greater threat loomed on the horizon. The extinct aliens had left more than just technology behind. Something waited out there in the dark between dimensions, watching as two civilizations tore each other apart with powers they barely understood. The hunt for answers would take Anthony to the far reaches of the galaxy and beyond. But for now, he had a war to win. The tide of war shifted dramatically. With their higher dimensional powers severed, Brunali forces crumbled before the onslaught of human technology. Anthony Mitchell stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, watching as swarms of Earthships emerged from shimmering gateways above Brunali worlds. "All ships commence bombardment," he ordered. Lances of searing energy rained down from orbit, carving fiery swaths across Brunali cities. Planetary defense grids sputtered and died under the relentless barrage. On view screens, Anthony observed human marines pouring through dimensional portals, materializing deep behind enemy lines. They wielded weapons that warped space itself, tearing through Brunali fortifications with minimal resistance. "Sir, we're detecting mass launches from the surface," an officer reported. "Civilian craft, mostly." Anthony's eyes narrowed. "Intercept them. No one escapes." Human enforcers pounced on the fleeing ships, disabling engines and forcing surrenders. Those who resisted were vaporized without hesitation. The clone of Anthony Mitchell led the assault on Crack 7, an industrial powerhouse. Brunali defenders made their last stand in a towering arcology at the heart of the capital. The clone strode through the streets, unflinching as energy beams sizzled past. He raised a hand, signaling his troops forward. They swarmed the base of the massive structure, breaching defenses and flooding inside. Floor by floor, they cleared the arcology of resistance. Brunali soldiers fought with the desperation of the doomed, but it was futile. The clone's forces were relentless, their weapons unstoppable. With the battle won, the clone stepped out onto a high balcony. He gazed across the sprawling metropolis, teeming with millions of Brunali civilians. "Bring the charges," he commanded. Terrifying devices were positioned throughout the arcology. At the clone's signal, they activated. A blinding flash engulfed the city. When it faded, nothing remained but a smoldering crater. On the Brunali homeworld, panicked citizens sought refuge in ancient temples. They huddled in ornate halls dedicated to long-dead gods, praying for salvation. But salvation never came. Human ships hung in the skies above, raining destruction. The sacred sites were reduced to rubble, crushing all within. Anthony Mitchell himself led the final push on the Brunali capital. Dropships disgorged waves of human shock troops. They moved through the streets with mechanical precision, gunning down any Brunali they encountered. "Please, we surrender," a Brunali civilian cried, hands raised. Anthony's response was a burst of weapons fire that left the alien's corpse smoking on the pavement. His troops followed suit, executing surrendering Brunali without mercy. In the ruins of the central citadel, Umbra made his last stand. The Brunali leader's eyes blazed with hate as he activated doomsday devices, willing to destroy his own world rather than let it fall. The weapons unleashed devastation, but humanity's technological superiority was absolute. As Umbra's stronghold crumbled around him, Anthony strode forward and ended the alien's life with a single shot. In the aftermath, human forces scoured the galaxy. Every Brunali outpost and refugee ship was hunted down and eradicated. Within a galactic cycle, the species that had threatened humanity for millennia was wiped from existence. Anthony, now an immortal android, assumed the mantle of Supreme Overlord. From his throne on Earth, he directed the subjugation of countless alien worlds. "Let it be known," he proclaimed to the assembled alien ambassadors, "that humanity now rules the stars. Resist and share the Brunali's fate." The ambassadors bowed their heads in submission as a new era of human dominance began. The harsh desert winds of Adramelech Prime whipped across the dunes, carrying whispers of hope through hidden underground bunkers. In a cavernous war room carved deep beneath the planet's surface, Solon hunched over a holographic display, his four eyes narrowed in concentration. "The Imperium grows complacent," he rasped to the assembled alien leaders. "Now is the time to strike." A burly Rindari warrior banged his hand on the table. "We should face them in open battle. Let us die with honor." Solon shook his head. "Patience, Kragoth. We must be cunning." He tapped a series of commands, bringing up schematics of Imperial data networks. "Our strength lies in shadows and circuitry." In dimly lit chambers across the planet, Cetian hackers interfaced directly with repurposed Ansible units. Their cybernetic implants pulsed as they dove into the data streams of the Imperium. "I'm in," one whispered, her voice tinged with synthetic overtones, rerouting supply shipments to Omega Centauri. Another Cedian's fingers danced across a holographic interface. Security protocols on Nexus Prime compromised. Rebel cells are go for infiltration. Across the galaxy, carefully orchestrated chaos erupted. On the industrial world of Forge, assembly lines ground to a halt as falsified orders flooded the system. Imperial troops on Bastion IV found their weapons deactivated by a virus. As reports of unrest poured in, Supreme Overlord Anthony Mitchell's face contorted with rage. He stabbed a finger at the tactical display. "Adramelech Prime. That's where these vermin are hiding." He turned to a figure cloaked in shadow. "Zenexecutor Indaris, take your fleet and crush this insurgency. I want that planet scoured clean." Indaris bowed low, a cruel smile playing across his lips. "It will be my pleasure, my lord." The Zenexecutor's battle group dropped out of hyperspace above Adramelech Prime, weapons primed, but as they moved to engage, proximity alarms blared. "Multiple contacts," an officer shouted. "They're using our own IFF codes." Before Indaris could react, a stolen antimatter warhead detonated, engulfing his flagship in searing light. Auxiliary systems failed as the ship listed out of control. "Plot an emergency jump," Indaris snarled, clutching a shattered arm. "Anywhere." The damaged vessel lurched into slipstream, leaving a trail of debris in its wake. On the bridge of his command ship, Solon allowed himself a grim smile of satisfaction. But the victory was short-lived. Soon after, reports trickled in of entire worlds going dark, rebel strongholds reduced to ash. The Mitchell clone carved a path of destruction across the stars, each conquered planet bringing him closer to Adramelech. Solon paced the war room, his alien features set in grim lines. "We have one last card to play," he announced to his lieutenants, "but the cost will be high." In the heart of a secret facility, technicians labored over a massive antimatter device, their most destructive weapon, stolen from the Imperium itself. With trembling hands, they armed the bomb and sent it hurtling toward Adramelech's sun. The resulting detonation tore a hole in reality itself. Where a star once burned, a maelstrom of dark energy now raged. Solon watched from the bridge of his flagship as the void storm consumed the system. "And now," he said softly, "we make our stand." The void storm raged, a maelstrom of dark energy tearing at the fabric of space-time. Amidst the chaos, Solon's rebel fighters darted between swirling eddies of gravitational distortion. Their nimble craft unleashed volleys of energy fire, peppering the hulls of Mitchell's lumbering capital ships. "Evasive pattern Delta," Captain Zix bellowed over the comms. His tentacles danced across the control panel as he jerked his fighter into a tight spiral. A barrage of Imperial suppression fire screamed past, missing by mere meters. Not all were so lucky. A Cedian cruiser to Zix's port erupted in a silent explosion, shredded by the maelstrom's gravitational shears. Debris scattered, pummeling nearby vessels. On the fringes of the battle, Solon's voice crackled through encrypted channels. "Boarding teams, prepare for jump. May the spirits guide your aim." A motley fleet of slipstream skippers emerged from concealment. These ramshackle vessels, held together by prayer and welding slag, represented the rebellion's last hope. Alien marines from a dozen subjugated worlds crowded their holds, faces grim with purpose. "Now!" Solon commanded. The skippers vanished in flashes of light, reappearing an instant later alongside Mitchell's warships. Docking clamps bit into Imperial hulls. Cutting torches flared as rebel boarders carved their way inside. Alarms blared through Imperial corridors. Stormtroopers in gleaming armor rushed to repel the invaders. Energy weapons discharged, filling the air with ozone and screams. In the bowels of a destroyer, a Rindari warrior roared a battle cry as he charged a squad of Imperial troops. His massive frame absorbed multiple hits before he reached them, cybernetic limbs tearing through their ranks. Behind him, lithe Cetian hackers interfaced with ship systems. their eyes glazed over as they entered the digital realm, seeking vulnerabilities in the destroyer's power core. "Containment breach in Sector 7, an Imperial officer shouted. "It's the rebels! They're—" His words cut off as the ship bucked violently. Emergency klaxons wailed. Aboard his flagship, the Mitchell clone snarled in frustration. "Seal all critical systems. I'll deal with this myself." He strode from the bridge, a phalanx of cybernetically enhanced Praetorians at his heels. They moved with inhuman speed and precision, cutting down rebel borders with ruthless efficiency. A bone-jarring impact rocked the vessel. Solon himself had arrived, leading an elite cadre of Rindari warriors. They smashed through internal bulkheads, carving a path of destruction. The two leaders locked eyes across a shattered command deck. Mitchell's android face twisted in a sneer. "I'll mount your head on my throne, alien." Solon hefted a crackling energy axe. "Then come and claim it, tyrant." They clashed in a fury of blows, cybernetic strength against alien resilience. Solon's warriors engaged the Praetorians in a desperate melee. Blood and hydraulic fluid mingled on the deck plates. Solon scored a hit, his axe biting deep into Mitchell's synthetic flesh. But the clone fought on, unleashing a flurry of strikes that left Solon reeling. A vicious backhand sent the rebel leader sprawling. Mitchell loomed over him, energy blade poised for the killing blow. "Die knowing your cause was futile." Solon spat blood and hit a concealed trigger. A nearby bulkhead exploded outward, the vacuum of space howling through the breach. As Mitchell stumbled, Solon dragged himself to a waiting escape pod. The hatch slammed shut as Solon's battered form collapsed inside. His pod jettisoned into the swirling chaos of the void storm, leaving the doomed assault behind. With their leader gone, the remaining rebels fought on. Under Janra's guidance, they breached the Imperial flagship's reactor core. The ancient Suresh, more machine now than flesh, interfaced directly with the ship's systems. "For freedom," Janra intoned, his synthesized voice devoid of emotion. "For the future." Energy surged through his cybernetic body. The reactor went critical, a cascade of uncontrolled reactions building to apocalyptic levels. Mitchell's clone barely escaped, making a desperate slipstream jump as his flagship detonated. The blast consumed nearby vessels, Imperial and Rebel alike. For a moment, it seemed victory was at hand. Then a massive wormhole tore open the fabric of space. Zenexecutor and Darius's reinforcements poured through, weapons blazing. Antimatter warheads detonated among the battered rebel fleet. Entire squadrons vanished in the onslaught. "All ships, emergency retreat." The order echoed across rebel frequencies. What remained of Solon's forces scattered, jumping to slipstream in a desperate bid for survival. Aboard a fleeing medship, Solon drifted in and out of consciousness. Through drug-addled haze, he watched a final transmission from the Suresh homeworld. Cities burned. Millions died screaming. An entire civilization, with all its wisdom and potential, wiped from existence. As darkness claimed him, Solon knew the terrible truth. They had lost. Humanity stood triumphant, its dominion absolute. The galaxy would know only tyranny and fear. The Age of Enlightenment was over. The Age of Humanity had begun.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.